Welcome to Peacebuilding Initiatives with José Barzola. Peacebuilding Initiatives are collaborative ways of developing healthy, positive relationships via dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, and exploring ways to shift our own perspective to build compassion and empathy within our communities. Thank you for joining us today. On today's episode, we are joined by Tom DiGrazia, who is a veteran peacemaker, collaborative lawyer, yogi, and lifelong advocate for justice and healing for over 5 decades. Tom has worked with indigenous communities, environmental movements, families in crisis, incarcerated individuals, and policymakers. Bridging law, mindfulness, and community-based conflict resolution. Former Robert F. Kennedy Fellow, Tom helped establish the first off-reservation Native Legal Aid Office in South Dakota and was given the Lakota name Kola Wicipe, meaning spiritual friend of the people. He later worked with Yupik communities in Alaska, earning the name Yupiit, which is real person, for his defense of subsistence rights in indigenous lifeways. Based in Hawaii for nearly 4 decades, Tom co-founded the Mediation Center Windward and the Yoga School of Kailua and the Hawaii Yoga Prison Project, a trauma-informed program teaching mindfulness and life skills to incarcerated men. He's also a published author, Peacemaker, a Sicilian American memoir, and Light on Peacemaking is the other book. Uh, he's an educator, an Earth Law Center fellow, and currently working to help give nature its own legal voice. Tom brings wisdom, warmth, and real world experiences to conversations on law, spirituality, justice, and what it means to be human in a deeply divided world. And it's truly a joy to have known Tom for, I gotta say, probably almost a decade now, since I've been here in Hawaii. He and I connected, I believe, through a local nonprofit known as the Conflict Resolution Alliance, which is a local nonprofit made up of mediators, facilitators, and other folks invested in interested in the field of bridge building, peacemaking, peace building, conflict resolution. So it has been truly just a joy to be able to explore ways to collaborate and come together. And I thank him so much for being here with us today. Before we do our general move into the conversation piece of things, I do want to share a poem that Tom has shared with me. And so I'm going to read his poem uh, called A Poem About Me. This is a memoir for all. Speaking for myself, if you take my Aries head as fine, tuned by my parents, Josephine and Sebastiano, then merge it with a wrestler's neck, a blacksmith's arms, and a lawyer's focus. Include Mott Street, NYC, or New York City, smarts, as well as a Siciliano cuore, heart, too, attached for living purposes, yoga consciousness and respect for and influenced by Lakota and Yupik ways of life. While marinating in the present feminist energy swirl and living in the protective bubble of Lanakai, heavenly waters, being watched over by the ever constant gaze of familia, present and ancestral, supporting my life song, constantly educated by the beauty of the seven arrows, the sky, il mare, the earth, my community of familia amici, the Kailua tribe, and it helps to be blessed with balanced contributions from the DNA of respectively the clans Grisanti and DiGrazia, and thoroughly seasoned by many of life's lessons, while earnestly living the life of a peacemaker and peace builder, coupled with the writer's need to express oneself, blessed with the drummer's rhythm, along with the determination of a long distance runner and a professor's curiosity. That is me. With my good Jiddish blood, friendships, and experiences thrown into my human profile for flavoring and drama fun. Oh, and I tremble to forget the women that have helped me complete my lifelong education and include La Moma or Mama, La Sorella, my wife, teachers, my daughter's teachers, I may nipoti insegnanti, my grandchildren's teacher, and the rest of the cast of wonderful supporting characters involved in my life drama incarnation on planet Earth. Alora, in the end, I'm a human composite of many lives within one lifetime. A life I've built over many roads, taken and not taken, experiences, challenges, and vicissitudes. The me is really the many, encapsulated in a single carbon-based physical body, mind, heart, linked with all other sentient creatures, past, present, and future. La vida es buena. Life is good.
Not bad.
I
Your Italian's a little rusty, but other than that, you're doing.
yeah. I will say I I appreciate you sharing this with me. I'm very honored to have read it. Maybe before the end of today, we can get you to read it yourself. But I know you shared this was a way that you it's really another way to do your bio, and it is really beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And um,
And know that you're the first person who's ever read it out loud,
oh,
other than me. Yeah.
well, thank you for the honor. I appreciate that. It reminds me of I write and I have even put on poetry competitions or poetry slams. I've never competed in them. So I got to work on my delivery.
Yeah.
But thank you so much today. So on today's conversation, we'll be talking with Tom about his book, Light and Peacemaking and Holistic Approach to Conflict and Peacemaking. So Tom, thank you so much for being here with us and your time and your grace. I'm hoping, as we engage in today's conversation, so as we look at how every conflict is a cry to be seen and heard, you write that in every conflict involves an attempt to be seen and heard. Can you explain what you mean by that and how that insight changes the way we engage with conflict?
Well, let's start with the term namaste, okay, which we hear battered around. I mean, there's commercials with it, and it's all over the place. And the deepest meaning there, and I've been involved as a yoga student and yoga teacher. Uh, it'll be 50 years in November. No, excuse me, September. And that term has many definitions. The one that I focus on, and the one I think in this time of great anger and angst that we're living through, yet again, repeating history over and over again. That term, I see the human being in your heart, and it reflects the human being in my heart, and we are one. Okay. So at a time when we have great divisions in this country and so much anger, I think it's important at the outset of this conversation, as fellow peacemakers, you and I, and also whoever may in the future review this Zoom meeting, to go deeply into the root of conflict. And the current root of conflict is anger. However, the anger, as most psychologists, sociologists, political scientists, yogis, and others, people who are Zen Buddhists, for instance, anger is a reflection of deep insecurity, of not being heard, not being seen, feelings of being left behind, deserted. It goes into your DNA. It can be passed on through DNA. It can come through a parent. It can come through a grandparent. It can skip a generation. And when you have that going on, especially in the world we're living in now, which is so technologically oriented and just taking off. I mean, I can't keep up with it anymore. I don't use a cell phone, and people scream at me, what? You don't use a cell phone? When I'm off island, or if when I get on a bicycle and my wife thinks I might fall off somewhere because I didn't wear my helmet, I carry a cell phone. But it's a conscious decision on my part, not to have that added angst that comes through that phone, okay, in my life. It's controversial. My wife is on my case, Louisa, all the time. Why don't you carry your phone? What's wrong with you? Join the 21st century. What are you, some barbarian? And all of that. And I admit to all of those things. Okay. But the point I'm getting at is people want to be heard. As a longstanding divorce lawyer and divorce mediator, you might recall, Jose, that I had a business here on the Windward side, and the program that, after many years of involvement, that in the last maybe 15 years of my practice here, since 1986, was educated divorce. And what I found as a peacemaker, which we might go into later, because I take the title peacemaker before I would say mediator. Okay, so just to make it easy for folks, I often say peacemaker dash mediator, and then you taught me to use peace builder, so I throw that one in as well. The anger that folks have, and the ability to diffuse that as a peacemaker is both a gift and an art form, and something that you need to work at if you want to call yourself a peacemaker. First, you have to find peace within yourself. That's number one. If you're not in a peaceful state of being, if you're in a state of angst personally as a peacemaker, if your relationships are falling apart with your significant others in your life, whether they're a spouse or a child or a grandparent or whoever, this really limits your ability to open-heartedly be of assistance to others. And what I found that you had to do was to diffuse the anger through recognition. And as a peacemaker, there's different techniques that you can employ. One, and the most oftentimes challenging, especially if you were first trained as a lawyer, is to be a good listener. Be able to sit and breathe and not react and not judge and keep an open mind and realize that this person that you're dealing with or persons that you're dealing with may not be people that you would have a relationship with in terms of friendship or family or what have you, but they are fellow human beings and must be treated holistically with respect and honor. And this can be a big hurdle. I got to the point where I got fairly good at this. And when someone would call by way of a referral from another lawyer or just hearing about me out there, I've probably done, I don't know, 50% of the divorces in Lanikai. I mean, I run into people all the time. I don't even recognize them anymore. Their children come up to me and thank me and say, "Oh, are you Tom DiGrazia? Yeah, and you were the mediator for my mom. You remember them?" And I go, "Yeah, sure." But I don't. But having that respect, having that choiceless awareness is what Mr. Krishnamurti, a great philosopher in the 20th century and one of my teachers. I used to go listen to him. My wife and I would go listen to him in Ojai, California. And there'd be maybe 500 people out in the Oak Grove. And we'd listen to him. And that was one of his things, choiceless awareness. It goes by other terms, mindfulness, for instance. Okay. But not immediately coming to a conclusion about someone, no matter how challenging what they're saying might be. And to be able to breathe. And this is where asana and pranayama come in. To be able to sit in a semi and sometimes a full meditative state where you are so focused on what is being said and the nuances in every word that you're hearing and the body language that you're observing on these folks. How are they using their hands? What's the distance between them? Are these people that need to be separated? Um, there were times, for instance, to diffuse situations where if they were available, and I would bring in, first of all, a psychologist. If a couple that was in a high emotional state between them were not um, in a preliminary analysis by me, whether that was over the phone or at a preliminary meeting, was showing a high emotional charge, is what the psychologists call it. I would not take the case during the latter part, especially when I could financially afford it, if they would not agree, if they didn't have existing counselors that I could communicate with, and they would give me permission to communicate with, and if they didn't, I would refer them out to people who were familiar with the mediation process and who could offer assistance. And sometimes it was counseling for both of them at the same time, but more often than not, it was on an individual basis. And so I had, and many times at a session, I would bring the psychologist in to observe, if nothing else, and to make whatever judicious comments that they were licensed to make. Other times I would bring the grandparents in to sit as observers, especially if they're, not especially, but particularly when there was a child custody issue, when parents were battling over the children, when they were putting their interests before the children. I would bring the grandparents in. And that could be an extremely stabilizing force. So sometimes there were a few cases that I had towards the end of my career where I had a psychologist there, and I had the financial planner there, and I had the grandparents there. A team approach, a collaborative approach. And the other thing that I learned over the years, one of our premier, I'm going to give her a plug right now, one of our premier lawyer mediators is Katie Bennett. Do you know Katie?
Yeah, I know Katie.
And Katie worked with me, I might dare say, as a mentee. I don't know if she would agree with that, being Katie. But in any event, we co-mediated cases together. And having that feminine energy, that feminine balance, made all the difference. Made all the difference. And remember, I was getting cases that the lawyers were giving up on. I mean, I was getting the referrals from the lawyers, who are competitors financially, right? Who are saying, I don't know what to do with this client or this situation. We've been in and out of court. I don't know how many times. The bill is getting astronomical. These folks are going to walk on me. Can you do something with them? And I would see what I could do. I rejected more cases than I took, especially depending on who the lawyers were that were referring them. One of the things I learned was one of the first questions I would ask when somebody called me on the phone before I ever would see them was, who's your lawyer? And when they would mention who the lawyer was, I would say, I'm sorry, I can't take this case.
Oh.
Because it told me something about them, that they were going to a high-priced, high-pressure, go to court for any little issue, and I might say this and get stoned for it within the profession, but run up that bill. We're going to do every deposition we can think of. We're going to send, and we're going to go in on this issue. Oh, he said that? No, we're going to court. We're going to get a judge. We're going to get a judge to do something about this. Those cases, forget about it. In Italian, we say niente, nothing. Those gone. So there were plenty of other cases, though. All right. But addressing that anger issue, getting to the root of it, or at least getting the the participants in mediation to go deep inside themselves and to realize where the conflict was coming. And I got particularly aggressive when children were involved. My Sicilian roots, you don't touch the children. You don't put the children in front of your own emotionally unmet needs and use them as a battering ram with the other participant. Now, take it to the larger picture. What are we facing in this country? And this is the time, I've said this, and you've heard me say it at board meetings, at conflict. This is the time of the peacemaker. This is the time when we need people, both professional, Aboriginal, indigenous, day to day. We need peacemakers. We need people who can
We need people coming together.
to bring them together, to see the connection here.
Yeah.
This is a holistic thing. We are not divorced from each other. What 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 goes on in our culture, in our society, on an individual basis affects it all. The Italians have a great expression for it. They call it un solo popolo, all one people. Okay.
Yeah, and I think you really speak to the interconnectedness of communities, and I find this a lot in well, a lot of Western culture tends to be a very nuclear mindset. But unfortunately, the reality is that the rest of the world, and many times, even if you go back to like various indigenous communities, it's all interconnected. It's about stepping into spaces with your ancestors, with your community, even if they're not physically there. Oh, they're there. You going back to your poem, you are a collection, a collective of all those that have come before you, are still here with you, or that you've connected in some method or another. And so, and unfortunately, too much of that is being forgotten. And so, yeah, you're definitely right. As far as it is, I can definitely sense, people are looking for, or can we build those bridges, or they're not right now. I wonder if you might share, how do you create space for people to feel seen, especially when tensions are high or emotions are raw? I know you talked a little bit about bringing in the grandparents, but I wonder if there's other, how do you diffuse those high emotions?
Well, you can start at a very preliminary level, which is environment, the
Mm.
physical environment,
Yep.
in which people are gathering to discuss, very deep emotional, financial, and family matters. And you've been to my home. You graced me with your presence for my 80th birthday, and with your
Thank
wonderful
you.
family. Was that your mom or your mother-in-law?
Yeah, yep. That
It was
was a
your mom,
family.
and she's something else. Now, let me tell you. Okay, that woman is very freaking deep. In the little time that I had with her, but creating an environment that's safe, an environment that's, and this is not always possible. And I'm speaking ideally. And I realize that a lot of folks out there who may listen to this may not, for financial and other reasons, be able to replicate this initially. But finding an environment that has greenery, an environment that has a waterfall or a fountain going in the background, that has very soft music in the background, where maybe you're offering some little finger, whether it's peanuts or crackers or something that can be shared among people. Okay. Um, but you can only go so far with environment. But that's one step that you can take. Um, whether it's an office that you're working out of or a home office that you're working. For us, peacemaking took place in our yoga studio,
Mm.
which we've been teaching yoga here out of that studio since 1990. So the vibes are really full of good yogic energy that's been in and out of there from all over the world. We've taught internationally, brought Japanese teachers here, et cetera, et cetera. So I often have heard that when you walk into that studio, you're already feeling a peaceful vibe. So that's number one. The other thing I can't stress enough, and something that you're really good at, which is listening. Being able to listen, not interrupt, not interject, not form opinions while people are just laying themselves out in front of you. To me, that's the most important thing. If there's one skill, the Yupik Eskimo people taught me um, since I was the only lawyer at time, the only lawyer, period, in all of Southwest Alaska, in 56 native villages. And I was the only white person, the only white man, you know. They would say to me, the Creator gave you 2 ears and one mouth. You should at least listen twice as much as you speak. So try to contain yourself, Mr. Lawyer.
I
You know,
love
you're talking about someone, who was born and raised in a competitive world in New York City, where you were the honest student and there were maybe 14 other honest students and everybody was getting their hand up first, oh, pick me, teacher, I know the answer, that kind of thing. Like quick Joe McGraw, like pulling a gun out of a holster. There was that. And then the law school experience and then dealing with the competitiveness and always having to be fast on your feet. So that was like a huge opening for me to realize that there was another way of relating to the world, that you didn't have to be that aggressive. And I still challenged by that, even at 80 years old. But that was something big that we taught. And if you hang out with indigenous people, you find they're quiet. They listen. They breathe before they speak. There's long interruptions, and they're very comfortable with silence, like right now.
I love that. Thank you.
So to me, that's always the key. Respecting that person, seeing that human being, that namaste
Yeah.
in the other person, and just wanting to be helpful. There's so much conflict in the world, and sometimes we have to, address it one at a time, one human being at a time, two human beings at a time.
No, thank you. It reminds me of talking about the silence reminds me of in in my experience, sometimes a strategy to figure out who's uncomfortable is who's going to break the silence first.
Mm, right.
But it is fascinating to after a couple times that you're like start noticing it's like, oh, it's always the same one or two people, while the other folks are just there's such serenity and just being together in the silence.
The
Very
Dalai Lama has a good take on this. One of the things he impressed me with one time was he said you need to distinguish between positive anger. I had never heard those two words put in that order: positive anger and hatred. He said positive anger is a good thing. He said if it's generated by your concern about the inequities in the world, about the lack of justice in the world, about the fact that there are people starving as we're speaking, that are people being bombed, whether it's in Gaza or the Ukraine or God knows where else, into being totally decimated. That kind of positive anger that brings out and is the precursor to empathy is a good thing versus hatred of another. That kind of anger, or what he called negative anger, is the thing to avoid. And that opens up, if I may, two thoughts. You can look at this from a biological point of view. What do I mean by that? Well, we have a nerve in our body called the vagus nerve. And it is the largest, one of the largest nerves in the body. And it runs from the midbrain and snakes through and around the spinal column and goes out into every major organ in the body, starting with the heart. Okay. And it's an open channel in which the heart is sending messages to the brain, and the brain is sending messages to the heart. And at the same time, is sending messages to every other part of the body and is controlling the amount of oxytocin in your body, okay, which is a hormone. The feel is usually called the feel-good hormone, or cortisol. okay, which is the what's invoked by the sympathetic nervous system when we are fearful of something. That's the thing that helped us to survive the time when there were large animals out there that we were trying to hunt and were chasing us, or we had to freeze in our tracks maybe because the animal, the particular ferocious animal, had poor eyesight or poor hearing. So it was flight or fight. Sometimes we had to fight. We were cornered. We had no choice. We had to fight. It's what kicks in warfare. What kicks in when there's somebody trying to mug you or what have you. It has a place in our life, but all too often, that sympathetic nervous system kicks in via the vagus nerve at inappropriate times. So you have a chemical thing that you have to be aware of. And what asana and pranayama practice, which are the two physical practices of the 8 limbs of yoga, teach us, is to be able to observe that hormone when it's being actually observe it and feel it in your body, that you're now being flooded with cortisol. Okay. Is it appropriate? Is it a situation where there's some robber that wants to stick you up, or somebody that wants to beat you up, or there's some physical danger? You need that rush, because that's also going to kick in adrenaline, okay, which is a compatriot of that hormone, to help you exit that or to give you additional strength to fight for yourself. Is that appropriate in a mediation session? So being able to observe it first in yourself, okay, as you're sitting there, and observing it in the conflicted, the people that you're working with, is a huge asset. Okay. And then on the other hand, to observe oxytocin at work, how that pushes your empathy buttons, how that makes you kind-hearted, how that makes you fall in love with a dog. Okay. Where you get, unrequited love. My dog is right behind me. Yeah, she's right here.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's that chemical side to all of this. And then there's the use of breath. I'm going to demonstrate here what I would call an emergency breathing exercise. I used to use this exercise, believe it or not. I'd be sitting outside, if you go down to the First Circuit where all the divorces used to take place before they were shifted to the west side of the island. You would check in at 8 o'clock in the morning. You had to be precise about being there with your client at 8 in the morning. And you check in and you'd be given a number. Okay, that was how many people were there for divorces at that time. So there might have been 20 or 30 divorces that day sitting in the audience. Everybody stressed out. Okay. The lawyers going off to the side and having these little sidebar conferences and dumping on each other, waving their hands. I mean, there was all this stuff going on, all this conflict. You could breathe it in. And then your number would be called, and you'd go into a hallway. Okay, and on either side of this hallway were these small judicial rooms, because divorce proceedings are held in private. They're not open to the public. And there were like 12 of those rooms, and it was like a factory, right? So the number would be called. You'd go and sit in that hallway, and then you would wait to be called by whatever judge was assigned the case. Okay, and that whole process would take about an hour on most days, because they were also bringing the court, the family court also deals with juveniles. So you had the juveniles who had been arrested the night before or broken their parole, and that, so you had that going on as well in there, all of that with their parents. And so while all of this negative cortisone was in the air, okay, I would go to the very end of that hallway where there were no courtrooms. And I would do this exercise quietly with my back turned so people couldn't see what I was doing. I didn't want to stand out because I'd probably get arrested and and do this exercise. And it's called Nadi Soldatna in Sanskrit. And it's called alternate nostril breathing. And all the breathing can be done through the nostrils, one nostril at a time. And there's a holding of breath. And by the time you do 3 rounds of this, I'll demonstrate it first. I think you're going to be able to feel, okay, that the vagus nerve is sending out a good message. Your breath is, and anxiety level is going to come down. So it looks like this. You got 3 fingers here. I'm right-handed. I'm going to put them right here on my third eye, on my Agni. All right. And then I'm going to put my thumb, my right thumb on my right nostril. And I'm going to breathe in through the left nostril, relaxing this hand as much as possible, being aware of any, while I'm doing this, where I'm holding tension in my body. And now I'm going to breathe out first through the mouth and now through the left nostril. Inhale. Hold the breath in. Close out the left nostril. Open the right nostril. Breathe out now, that breath that you're holding through the right nostril. Close the nostril. Hold the breath out. So it's a 4-part breath movement. Now, right nostril open. Breathe in. Close the nostril. Hold the breath. Left nostril open. Breathe out. Close the nostril. Hold the breath out. On your own, breathing in through the left nostril. Relax. So while that breathing, you feel a little more relaxed? Yeah. So when your world is falling apart, or seems to be, that's your go-to right there. And you would do several rounds of it, or as many rounds as you felt you needed. While I was doing that, it's pretty hard to talk and breathe at the same time. I became aware of tension in my neck, tension in my mandibular jawbone, in my trapezoids, and in my gut. And as I was breathing, I was letting go in those areas. All right. So that's something very, very practical. I would also teach this when appropriate to the right participants. I would teach them this exercise and a few more things that you can do just pushing away from a desk, chair yoga, for instance, chair asana. Anyway, I could go on about that, but that was another very effective tool
No, thank you.
that can be used.
Thank you for taking us through those and going a little deeper into the vagus nerve and the breath. I wonder if you might share how do you integrate breath and these somatic practices into your legal or mediation work? Have I could see as a yogi, but during a mediation or legal practice, are you will the parties participate? Will they take it in?
So not everybody, not, I would say on a percentage basis, maybe about 30% were open to that, both
Oh,
parties.
very low. Okay.
Okay. One greater percentage, one of the parties would be. One little vignette. You were up at my studio, and you know there's a pool out there, right? And I remember one case that I had where I tried everything. I was pulling Nadi Soldatna and Krishnamurti and
Yeah.
psychologists and all of this, and I couldn't get the husband to listen to anybody but himself
Oh
in a
no.
very loud
Yeah.
voice. So finally, after exhausting 3 or 4 different of these techniques, some of which we're discussing, I said, I forgot what his name is. Let's say it was Harold. I said, Harold, come with me. I took him to a different part of the area up on that second floor. And was again, I was saying, look, this is not going to go anywhere. If you keep interrupting your wife, if you keep putting your finger in her face like this, every time she opens her mouth, forget about it. You're going to be back in court tomorrow, you know? Oh, she does a goddamn bitch. She went out and did. So I said, come with me. So we go back up and we're walking by the pool, and I pushed him in the pool. Close him. I pushed him in the pool.
Oh my
I've
goodness.
only done that once, but I pulled that out of my bag of tricks. He was a different man after that.
You like baptized them or
I gave him
something.
a towel. I said, sit down now and God damn it, keep your hands to yourself,
Was he upset as he came out of the
He kept laughing.
Oh,
He kept he kept laughing. Yeah.
wow. That could have gone very the other way.
I only did that once. And I took a chance. I took a risk with that. Number
Yeah,
one, that he knew how to swim.
that's true.
And that he would get it. And he did. And that case actually worked out quite well after that. I mean, they would laugh about that every time they would come in. You're going to throw me in the pool again? Well, if you get out of line, I will. Anyway, I forgot what your question was.
How do you integrate breath or somatic practices in
Oh,
your legal or mediation
I'm
work?
doing it. Okay, so if I feel my temperature rising, my emotional temperature rising in a given case, okay, I'm without folks knowing it, I'm doing my breath work. I'm just conscious of my breath, okay, and it's helping me to pay attention and to listen because I'm looking for signs. I'm looking for words that I can bring to the attention, words that are words of hostility that are emotionally charged, and then and I asked permission at the preliminary meeting with both parties. I said, look, I'm going to be asking you to do certain things. I don't want you to take offense. I don't want you to think that I'm picking on you or that I'm favoring your spouse or your husband or anybody else. But you're paying me a lot of money, okay, to sit here, all right? And I'm not a bump on the log. I'm not, the first thing you learn in mediation school is that mediators are neutral. They're supposed to be neutral. And yes, that's true, but not neutered. And if somebody's acting like an asshole, you're going to point it out. And you've gotten permission beforehand from the parties, and you can remind them of that. Well, what? I'm an asshole. Remember at that preliminary meeting we had, we spent an hour and a half and we went over the rules of the game? Yes, you're being an asshole. Let me rephrase that for you. You're not being very helpful here. You're not tamping down the emotional energy in the room. You're not thinking about your children. What are you thinking about here? What's going on in your mind? Can you share that with us? So things like that. And it's in the moment and it's improvised.
Yeah.
Not like I sit down and I say, okay, today I'm going to do A, B, C, D, and E. I mean,
And you can. A lot of it's the gut feeling. You
right,
have to feel out the energy, the people in there, because as much as you plan, we're always pivoting, and you never know. Someone might have cut somebody off on the way there, and all of a sudden that changes things.
exactly,
So
exactly. And that's also why we love the profession.
yeah,
Is
it
that
keeps us on our toes.
it calls upon us to go deep inside of ourselves,
Yeah.
improvise, be creative, find a path, find a path where you can help a couple find their way to a more peaceful existence. And if not for them, for the children. And I use that in the broader sense now. Take it into the world picture. Okay. What's it all about here? What kind of world are we leaving for our children? What kind of example when adults can't be in the same room with each other, where people feel physically threatened,
Yeah.
where people don't want to expose themselves on the internet because they may become a target? What kind of world are we living for the
Yeah.
children? Are we thinking about the children?
Yeah. That's very true.
Except when it comes to abortions? Yeah.
Hmm. Now you've taught yoga for decades, including in the prisons. Uh, I wonder if you might share, what changes have you witnessed in incarcerated individuals practicing yoga and mindfulness?
Okay, let me be clear, and I wish Louisa was here, uh,
Yes.
because she's the one, she's the warrior, the peaceful warrior
Uh,
that it's inside. When we first started our program, the Hawaii Yoga Prison Project, um, it was strictly on a voluntary basis. Lou worked for years pro bono, going in there at Halava, at OCCC, at High Security, all these places. This little woman, she's like 5'3" or something like that, and the men love her in there. She's a goddess. I mean, nobody would dare. People keep asking her, when we were recruiting new yoga teachers, they say, well, don't you feel intimidated or don't you feel fearful in there? She's got a core of support. They would kill somebody before they would let anyone harm her. Okay. But I did teach there at the very beginning for the first few years of the program. So I got my taste. And then I went into the administrative end of this. So I administrate the program on a full time basis. But what I can tell you is, and this, the change that we see can be summed up like this. Number one, and this is something that you and I talked about before we went on Zoom. We now have competitive yoga teachers, which was unheard of. Teaching yoga inside a prison, forget about it. No way. I'm not going in there to the men, to these guys. I mean, you would have it would be a typical class, especially at OCCC, which is the county jail. So people are there serving a sentence of less than a year, a misdemeanor, or they're awaiting trial, or they've broken their parole, okay, and they're waiting for some kind of adjudication. So it's full of these folks. And so you'd be watching TV and they would talk about somebody was murdered in Hilo. Okay, some guy cut his wife's throat and all these gory details. And 2 days later, they'd be in your yoga class at OCCC. That was one type. Then you have the homeless folks, the houseless folks, I'm going to be more proper, who are taken off of the street for periods of time, who are suffering all kinds of mental illness, many of them, and physical remedies. So you got a guy now sitting in the front row who's dribbling as you're talking,
mm,
foam coming out of his mouth. And there's the guy who murdered his wife, 2 weeks ago, sitting over here. So if that's gonna if that's gonna disturb you as a teacher, then you're probably you probably don't belong there. But number one, that's a huge change that the field is open up now, and we have competitors. So we'll see if they're gonna. I mentioned to you if they're gonna go with the old blood or the young blood. The
con-
other big thing that's
I
changed.
just have to say though, congratulations, because what a predicament or situation to be in that there's other folks that want to serve the community, serve specifically the folks in the prison.
Yeah,
So I know you're being very modest, but one of the other things you shared was that some of the folks are people that you've taught.
yeah.
So your students have been inspired by your work
Mhm.
that they want to continue. So I just want to put that out there because I think I mean that's really peace building. It's like, building those bridges, getting community involved,
Mhm.
shifting the perspective to how we're all showcase how we're all interconnected. That's the beauty of it. But yeah, please go right ahead.
So that's one marker. Okay. A second marker is that we've had the first student. He's serving a life sentence for murder, and he's Lou's greatest student. And we just awarded him a teaching certificate. He's put in over 300 hours in our program, and he's the first student that's been awarded. There was a ceremony that was held at the prison. I think it was at Waiava, and his first name is Richard. And this guy's teaching. Lou lets him teach in the class. And our dream has been that someday the teachers would be former inmates. Who better? Okay, who become dedicated? Because the students that Lou has, they're carefully screened through the education department. So we're not getting the kind of unfiltered folks that you get at OCCC. At Waiava and Halava, there's education departments that filter out folks who would be problematic in a classroom setting. So that is another marker that now we've had our first student who's also a former medical doctor, by the way. So he brings that information in. So we're really happy about that. The other thing that's even more telling is that the Department of Corrections has a new name now. It's the State Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. The word rehabilitation finally has been added to their title. And that's a sea change in itself, right there. So you got that. The downside is that the powers that be at corrections don't do follow-up in terms of when these folks leave. Because almost 98% of the people who are in these correctional facilities at some point are going to leave. They don't do any follow-up.
Mm.
So it's hard to have any statistical hard data about have these folks really been quote unquote rehabilitated? Has the course of their life changed because of their practice? But I can tell you we're required to put in all kinds of reports on a monthly, quarterly basis. And Louisa is a writer. She's a great writer. And one of the evaluations comes from the students themselves. And the evaluations are, I mean, they're beyond excellent. I mean, people talk about how they've been changed, how one leg was shorter than the other, and now the legs have evened out. How they were constantly getting into fistfights with fellow inmates, and now they do their breathing instead. They go to their cell and do their breathing, you know? So we have that kind of feedback. But at some point, and that would be a next step, it would be nice to do a real follow-up with it. And Lou's been working at this now for 32 years. 32 years, paid and unpaid, contract, no contract. And she's made a dent. She's made a dent, you know. And I mean, I also need to acknowledge our board of directors. And I'm the guy who has to deal with the state. God help me, you know. That's why I've got gray hair, whatever hair I have left. So anyway, I love it.
No, thank you. That's amazing.
What else you got?
Uh, uh, I mean, in your book, you talk a little bit about the peace and the war chiefs within us. I wonder if you might describe two forces. Could you explain, the metaphor a little further and how it helps us understand ourselves in conflict?
Well, that's the thing. I think everything we've been talking about up until now, you had a choice. You can where that metaphor came from actually was from my time with the Lakota.
Mm.
Learned from the elders there that in times past, pre-white man, and even during the 19th century, the Lakota elders would have two kinds of chiefs. They would have war chiefs and they would have peace chiefs. So you had someone like Crazy Horse, well-known figure, who was a war chief. So if the council in its wisdom, they would listen to Crazy Horse say, these Shawnee are coming to our hunting grounds and they're taking our game away and they're going to deplete this and we're going to have to move in the next few years because there's not enough game, there's not enough subsistence to feed them as well as us. Or the issue might be they're stealing our horses okay, which was a big deal. Horses were like huge. You determine a person's wealth by their horses uh, in that society, and they're stealing our horses, and that's got to stop. Okay, we need those horses. We hunt from those horses. How are we going to hunt the buffalo and on and on? Or they're coming and they're kidnapping our children because their population is depleted and they want to take these kids or our women. Okay, so these are serious things. So now the council is hearing from Crazy Horse, let's say. On the other hand, there's Red Cloud. He's the diplomat. He's the peace chief. And he comes in and he says, look, if you let Crazy Horse go here, number one, our young people are going to die in that pursuit. They're going to want seeking revenge from us, and we're going to constantly have to be on guard. All the things he's talking about are just going to continue, you know. And there's other ways of settling this. Let me go and speak to their chiefs. Let me go and request, and they had sign language in those days, so you could communicate. That was the lingua franca of the day. Okay, so you could go to any tribe and with hand signals be able to communicate at a very high level. So let me go and see if we can work something out here. Maybe we give them a few horses. We have extra horses. Let's give them a few horses. Maybe there's a couple of women here who are not satisfied with tribal life here, and might be in love with somebody from that tribe. We can talk about that. Let's go talk about it first. So the elders would deliberate and they would make a decision. Is it going to be the war chief, or is it going to be the peace chief? So take that metaphor into your own life. What's it going to be? Take the inmate that we were talking about before, some of the inmates. This is what they relate in their stories and their evaluations. So before I started yoga class, I was constantly in fistfights. I was constantly fighting, whether it was over food or whether it was a comment or a look that somebody gave me, or because somebody was just being an asshole and needed to be taken down. You know, I was doing that. Okay. Or I was confronted. I was minding my business. And this guy came up to me and started pushing me, you know, to show that he was dominant and that I had to kiss his ring, so to speak, if I was going to survive in this module up here. Now, I've spent 2 years in your yoga classes. Okay. And now when I'm pushed like that, okay, I can go to my breath in the moment. And if I can't do it in the moment, I'll go to my cell or I'll go to some other secluded place if I can find one in there and calm myself down. Bring my cortisol level down. They actually use that word because what Lou does with her work is she writes these incredible essays, which she distributes weekly on everything that we cover in those yoga classes. So they can go back to their cells and have a document that's 5, 6, or 12 pages long that they can study all week. She's going to put all of that in a book someday, if we ever get around to it. So that's what I mean about there's a choice there. So in that case, that inmate is chosen to be the peacemaker and to go to an intermediate. So Lou might have asked him and said, well, how did you negotiate that? That was you, but you still got to deal with this guy on a daily basis. He said, I found out that his best friend in here is a friend of mine. So I went to that friend and explained that I wanted him to lay off me, that I didn't want to get into a fight, but I would defend myself if I have to. And I'd break his neck, so to speak. So he found another way of dealing with it. Okay. Or he went quietly, without anybody knowing it, to one of the ACOs and they put them in different modules. So there were other ways of dealing with it. So that's what I mean. Take that into the work that we do, whether it's at this level, whether it's a divorce mediation or a conflict in a corporation or at the university or whatever it is, or if it's on the larger scale in this country and what have you. That's the kind of work, that's the kind of thing we have to emphasize. We can keep arguing with each other. We can complete denigrating the other side, them, that pronoun you hear, them, they, right? Or we can find another way. And this is, I'm going to go back to my theme here. This is the time of the peacemaker. These are the things that the Conflict Resolution Alliance, I love those. I love everybody in that organization. I was there for 10 years. Okay. But I kept pushing for something that the association is either not prepared or not capable of doing, which is to go out aggressively as people find ways more aggressively of spreading peace. Okay. You're going to be a war chief or you're going to be a peace chief. Mm-hmm. Let's explore the peaceful way first, at least. You can always go to war. That's easy. Just go slap somebody or shoot somebody or call somebody a name, you know, a MAGA freak or whatever word you want to use, a lib. That's what I mean. That's why I use that metaphor.
No, thank you. Shifting a little bit to family conflict and the educated divorce. Divorce can be deeply painful and often very adversarial. And you've kind of talked about this a little bit. But how does your educated divorce program shift that experience? One, and also, what advice might you give to couples starting the divorce process who want to protect their children and preserve dignity?
Well, you know, if a couple can agree that they want to protect their children, that's the first step.
Yeah.
That's the first step right there. No matter what our differences are, no matter how emotionally we're not suited for each other, or how I've been betrayed, or whatever the issue is, okay, that's the first issue. Do you want to protect those children? So that's where that's my opening. Okay. It's not about you. The children didn't ask for this. Okay. It's about the children. How are we going to take care of these children? What ideas do you have? Oh, you want to do this? You want to take the kid to you want to take the children to Idaho and leave the husband here where he only sees the children. How can we handle that? I know you got to go to Idaho because that's you got work there and you're going to be a single mom. Usually that was the case. And you're going to be a single mom and you need that money and you have family there. And so you have some security and protection. Can you understand that, Mr. Husband? Can you understand that's a human need? Okay. Now on the other side, can you understand? And you're giving them literature, you're giving them things to read and to study, educate,
Yeah.
educate. Okay. So what do we have here? So now you have the husband. He's going to miss all of this time with his children. Isn't there some way that we can find how these children can be shared? Is that a possibility? Can we at least explore that? Can we speak to psychologist Anna over here, who's a specialist in this area? Maybe she has some ideas. Are you open to listening to that? That kind of approach, not where I'm telling them what they should or shouldn't do, but giving them tools that they can utilize, okay, and giving them resources that they can go to if they haven't already done so. You're
Yeah.
fighting.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're fighting over money. Let's go to a financial planner here. What are the tax implications going to be if you split up the marital estate this way?
Yeah.
How can you raid your retirement accounts and share those? You want the house? You want to remain in the house? How are you going to make the other party feel equitable about doing that? Okay, since they have participated in purchasing that home and keeping it afloat all these years. On and on like that. You need a resource? You want to sell the home? Here's a realtor, okay, that I can, here's the 3 names of realtors that I can recommend to you in Lanikai, okay, who've gone through this process themselves and are sensitive, and I've worked with before, who can help you find a way to maybe sell this house in a way that makes sense for you and the family.
Yeah.
What's the resource? What do you need? Educate yourself. Don't be ruled by your emotions. Don't be ruled by your cortisol freakouts, you know. And there's life, and then also being encouraging. There's life after divorce. There's life after all of this. You're going to go on, statistically, depending on their ages, statistically, you're going to remarry the husband within 2 years and the wife maybe within 5 to 10, because usually they've had enough of the man that they don't want to hear about getting remarried.
Mm,
So, but you're going to remarry, okay? Children are going to be introduced to significant others in your lives. How are you going to handle that? Let's speak to the child psychologist over here and see what ideas she has, how to ease that. None of this is going to be easy, but we can make it easier.
yeah.
And you can see I have a lot of passion here and a lot of intensity on it. That works. They pick up on that energy because I'm coming from here, from the quarter, from the heart. Not so much from up here, maybe from both. It's a balance.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it is such a highly intense experience and the emotions are there. So being able to shift your perspective and put that aside and try to refocus on what's best for the children. And I imagine that that's truly just what probably gets really, really complicated when there are children involved, as opposed to when there isn't. I imagine it's just a separation of the assets at that point. Um, so peacemaking in the 21st century. You write that, we talked about the time of the peacemakers. Um, and, as I look at this question, we've kind of talked about, what is the role in our increasingly divided world? We talked about the bridge building. But how do you see that communities might be able to cultivate more public dialogue, empathy, healing, especially in these polarized times, and not to, it's just like headline after headline after headline. And many times it feels as though the one that is happening today is worse than the one that was happening. You kind of forget about what they were talking about last week or last month. It just feels like a lot of noise at one point.
Well, um, and this is ideal, of course.
No, thank you.
I've been shouting in the wilderness on this one for a long time. But we have a very talented pool of peacemakers, both professional and indigenous. We haven't even discussed Ho'oponopono, okay, and Hawaiian, Native Hawaiian views of all of this. And perhaps if there's time and my voice lasts, we can. But those resources need to be brought together. The Conflict Resolution Alliance, the Matsunaga Center, um, Tracy Wilkins' shop, wherever all these resources are, and have a grand weekend meeting in which we discuss as peacemakers, as mediators, as facilitators, of people of religious faith, anyone else that we can think of that needs to be included in that pool of people, and come up with a process or processes here, experimenting here in Hawaii and using it as an example, perhaps nationwide, um, to bring people together. I'll give you an example. Um, when a former legislator who represented this area here was familiar with uh, my work, our work, asked me, she said, we got a big issue. I'm going back a good 10 to 15 years. Dick Mosier and I did this together, by the way. And Katie, she broke in as a facilitator on this particular case. And I said, she came to me and she said, Tom, she said, you're familiar with the peacemaking world here. She said, do you think you could help on this issue? She said, my office is being flooded. This is Laura Thielen. And she said, my office is being flooded on this issue of homeless people in Kailua and Waimanalo. She said, but particularly in Kailua. She said, I'm hearing from one group of people that just want homeless people just arrested and removed. And then I'm hearing, she says, from another group of people who want to, bring resources in, provide facilities and so forth, who want to handle it in a different way, she said, in a more humane way. She said, do you think uh, you and some of your colleagues could be helpful? I said, well, so I immediately called Dick, and Dick said, yeah, count me in, naturally. And then we brought Katie in. And so we were having monthly meetings here in Kailua. Now, remember, this is a decade or more ago. And when the meetings started, when the facilitation started, there was a lot of acrimony, a lot of finger pointing and yelling and so forth. And long story short, so what we did is we brought in people with information, education is that educational component, to talk about different options. We brought in the police to talk about how they see the world on this issue. We brought in people from different various religions who had programs that they could share and so forth. And this went on for months, at least 6 months to 12 months. It's back there in my memory somewhere. And at the end of that, um, they came up with a program and resolved at the time, and as I just know viscerally, things have improved here in Kailua, where there was a balanced approach, okay, in which these people were now respecting each other, were understanding where they were coming from, and why they were coming from them. It turned out that the people who were concerned about security had people that were defecating on their property, who were walking into their garages and stealing stuff. And you got a group that's easy to blame, just the way you can blame refugees and immigrants for all your woes. And so they were concerned. They were feeling very insecure. Okay. And on the other side, people thought it was barbaric to blame houseless, homeless people for all the ills that might be occurring in a community, and that there was a more humane way of doing this. And we helped to bring in a, a, a big bus that had showers and stuff in it, where people could come right here in the middle of Kailua and get a shower, get some clean clothing, and be able to be able to go to a job interview, for instance. So it came a real mix of everything. The police were more cooperative in terms of providing security, especially at the beaches and so forth. And it worked. And it worked. So what I'm suggesting is, and also if you Google what communities are doing around the country, I forgot the names of the programs, and I'm sure I wrote something about this in one of my essays, that are bringing people together on these issues that are politically dividing us in this country, and are doing a pretty good job of it. At least they're not throwing bombs at each other. People are not feeling that they're going to be singled out and shot at or otherwise harangued by others. So it's possible to do this. And all I'm suggesting is that we need to make that effort. If we're truly peacemakers, if that's what we're promoting here, find peace within yourself, number one, okay? And then collaborate with other peacemakers and figure out a program. I don't have the answers here. I don't have some magical thing that I can say or some wand that I can wave. I don't. But together, operating as one mind, many people operating as one mind, we can figure out anything. And this has been the hallmark of human existence. This was the hallmark of tribal existence. This is what I learned from the Yupik and from the Lakota and from all the indigenous people that I've worked with over the years. Yeah. And also and it's one other thing that we haven't touched on, and we don't have to go into it, but my passion right now is working for the Earth Law Center and getting, you mentioned it at the outset, in one sentence, giving nature a legal a legal voice, the way a corporation has a legal voice, or where the child gets a guardian ad litem in a courtroom to represent them. And to do this so nature has its own standing.
Yeah.
That's not to say that all these nonprofits, environmental nonprofits, don't do a world of good. Most of them do. But we need more of that. Okay. We need to make peace with nature, with Mother Earth. Okay. What are we doing there? I mean, do we just have meetings all the time and read the minutes of the past meeting, or do we get proactive? I've called upon the bar association here, and I went to the bar president. I wrote a very strong email to him, uh, asking that the bar take a position. And what I got back was the standard thing. Well, we're a nonprofit, and we can't be political and so forth. Well, but you can encourage lawyers to stand up. You can encourage somebody as a lawyer to go out in a group of lawyers and make their opinions known. Okay, you can do that. Other bar associations, by the way, are doing that around the country now. Massachusetts, California, etc. So there's a world that we're just not touching upon. We just can't sit here and leave this mess. And this is cyclical. You go back into the 30s and 40s, you know, go back to the 20s, go back to the Immigration Act of 1924, which was designed to prevent Italians, Southern Italians in particular, my people, my tribe, you know, from coming to this country. There were too many of us. And that didn't change until the 1960s when that law was rescinded. Or it could have been the Chinese Exclusion Act. So this is old news. We seem to go through these cycles. It was, I came of age in the 60s. I was out there, took off from law school, went to all of the demonstrations in Washington, D.C., was chased and gassed by the police, you name it. We had the audacity to think, as aspiring yogis and Zen Buddhists, that if we surrounded the Pentagon with enough people and all owned at the same time, I'm serious about this, and all owned at the same time, that we could lift the Pentagon up and drop it to shake up the people inside there. Well, we owned ourselves horse and we weren't able to do that. But that was a great lesson. But I mean, at that particular demonstration, there must have been 250,000 of us all owning at the same time.
This
That
is
alone,
around the Pentagon. Is that what I'm hearing?
in front of the Pentagon. Yeah.
I gotta look up images of this because that is, yeah, I mean, talk about dreaming big.
So anyway, that's how young and naive and open-hearted we were at the time. Most of us, anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's inspiring though. And yeah, you're right. There is this like cycle of oppression in history. And I don't know, we can s- say is it human nature? I mean, uh, yeah, I guess it is because I think back to talking about nature itself. I always reflect upon, 5 years ago with the beginning of the pandemic. Nature had a moment to heal itself because as humans we weren't out and about doing what we do. And I think there's a lot of lessons that we should have taken away from that. But unfortunately, we went back to our old ways or worse ways.
Mhm.
Uh, and so, yeah, there is that like greed and yeah, the ego, the I, and I just don't know how much longer. At some point something's bound to break, and I think that's just yeah, it's in history. Not to say that, and I guess you look at history and you look at like, oh, then there's the positive, we came back, but the pendulum can only swing so often. At some point, it's going to break. So hopefully, we're able to create some lasting change before it truly does.
Well, we have a fairly good record in in past history, going way back, of that pendulum, and that's what yoga is all about: balance,
Yeah.
finding balance within yourself and in relationship with others.
Yeah.
So it's all about balance, finding that balance. The Buddhists call it the middle road, the middle ground. You know,
Yeah.
but I don't think we have any choice, you and I, in others. You have young children. I have grandchildren. I have six grandchildren.
Yeah.
Um,
Congrats. It's
thank
amazing.
you. And what kind of world are we going to leave them with?
Yeah.
You know, with
Question just kind of came to mind. Have your grandchildren, and I obviously don't know their age range, but have they read your book? Have you had a conversation about it?
um, I know my children have.
That was an assignment, it sounds
That
like.
was that was required if they wanted pasta on Sunday. But I'm not sure. Yes, yes, the older ones have. So I have Jonah 24, his brother's 21, Messina's 18,
Yeah.
and it's had its effect. I mean, Messina, we mentioned prior to going on Zoom here that she's coming. She's in the air now.
Yeah, yeah.
Five of her girlfriends.
Yeah.
Um, she was affected by all of this early on, and she was one of the lead plaintiffs in the Navahini case.
Mm,
Right. So the whole family was involved in that, along with the other families and young women and boys who were involved in that case. And she's read the book.
my final question, I'll just read it, but we've kind of answered it in itself, was just about becoming a peacemaker in one's own life and community, where to begin. And I think you talked about already, it one with the self, and I think two would be at the home. You know, we touched upon that, and really just our community, our neighbors. I always talk to folks about, do you know your neighbors' names? Do you know what they do for a living? You don't, well, just, I mean, you don't have to be best friends, but there should be some
Right.
relationship there.
Right.
Uh, because at the end of the day, that is part of your community, whether you, you accept it or not.
Mhm.
And yeah, and as you shared, there's great strength in the power of coming together, and that's how we build those bridges. So, um, Tom, I just have to say, uh, thank you so much for your time today. It's just, you've left us with a deep sense of, I honestly have so much gratitude for you, and just very appreciative about your lifetime of service, your fearless compassion, the wisdom you bring to the work of peacemaking, through your legal advocacy, your teaching, your poetry. I imagine there's more, and maybe there's a publication coming in the near future.
Wow.
You remind us that healing is not only about, it's personal, it's social, it's environmental, and it's not only possible but essential. It reminds you talked about Ho'oponopono, and I actually happened to attend a 2-day session called Aha Ho'oponopono a month ago, and I spent the room with 2 days with 200 people who are practitioners, and then there were probably another 100 on Zoom. And one of the lines that resonates for me was someone shared, as healers, we need to spend time with other healers to basically take care of ourselves. And so, with that said, that is exactly what. Thank you. Thank you for providing that space and continuing to do that. Um, Showing us that the path of the peacemaker is not about avoiding conflict, but about approaching it with courage, humility, and humanity. Truly. So, uh, definitely in these times of division, it often feels like the default, So, thank you for offering a powerful alternative of connection through community, justice through empathy, and transformation through presence. Empathy is one of those things that uh, sometimes folks are just afraid to engage in, to open up about. So, for those listening in, if Tom's message resonates with you, we encourage you definitely to explore his book, Light on Peacemaking, and to reflect on your own role in the webs of relationships around you. What does it mean to bring light, to bring peace into the spaces we inhabit every day? So, Tom, thank you for sharing your story, your insights, your heart with us today. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us in this conversation.
So, final word. I want to go right back to you. This is a man with a future in peacemaking. He's got all the talent that you would need. Uh, he is a walking embodiment of empathy and love, and has incredible intelligence and asked all the right questions today. And I love him. And I wish you the best. Buona fortuna.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. You're ever so illustrious, kind, and I truly do appreciate you. And I think for folks, goes back to the storytelling, embracing the stories, your own stories, and as you connect with others, you build upon those stories and you create new stories. And so, thank you. Until next time, stay grounded, stay open, stay human. So, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Mahalo nui.